Well, good afternoon, friends, evening, morning, wherever you're calling in from or watching from. It is good to be here. It has been quite the day for me. Lots of preparation. Trying out something new today. You might see a few different things happening on the screen. Trying to up the ante with my streaming skills. So you'll see a chat there pretty much at all times on different screens as we go through the conversation today. You may even see some fun little acrobatic things pop up on the screen if we have new subscribers or if we have some sort of chat features going on, or I'm not sure if it'll happen with the like feature. But if someone subscribes to the channel, you'll see some fun little things going on. You are welcome to use Super Chat if you would like to. That will also get a fun little thing going on. Yeah, I'm excited. Today's going to be, as you guys have asked or requested, I gave several suggestions for the dialogue today. And so I have been doing my due diligence, prepping all the way up until the last minute here, trying to get things ready for the conversation today. It'll be a longer one today. But I can tell you this, it won't go longer than 3 hours. And if you feel like you need to step out for a time, that's okay, because it's always going to be on the stream. It'll always be available in the Rebuttal playlist. So today's conversation is going to be kind of twofold. Those of you that have been paying attention on the posts on my YouTube channel have noticed kind of a dialogue back and forth with ADL, with Edwin. I think it's specifically Edwin. I don't ever really know who it is because there's like 4 of them, but I think it was Edwin anyways. And so, well, I did my dialogue back and forth. But the last kind of response from Edwin, I think, justified a little bit more in-depth response, and it ties into the overarching conversation, since today is going to be a episode 11 dealing with the 70-week prophecy. Now, ADL, Edwin, has requested that I potentially debate Roy Gane. I don't know that would be valuable. I certainly will not be doing that on their channel. But do me a favor, have a quick prayer about this. In fact, keep this in your prayers, because what I'd like to do is request a conversation between Roy Gane and Jerry Gladson on my channel. I don't know if either of them will even show up or do that. I do have some fun, exciting news. I did get the publisher, is it Georgius Press? I think it is, reached out to me on my website this last week, asking if I would be willing to read, review, and interview Jerry Gladson with his latest book that was published a couple of weeks ago. I think it was officially launched beginning of December, maybe about a month ago, but it is like an almost 600-page commentary on the 5 scrolls. It is not a cheap book. They are going to send me the commentary for free. I believe it's about $120 for the commentary. They're going to send it to me. I am going to read it. I'm going to review it. And we will have Dr. Gladson on. So excited for that, and excited to really hopefully get further kind of connected to Dr. Gladson, and we'll see if maybe we can get a former Adventist scholar to talk with an Adventist scholar. I don't know. We'll see. Miracles can happen. Hey, I'm wearing a new hat today. It's going to become kind of a thing. This was a gift for Christmas. It is Detroit native. And well, I'm not actually a native to Detroit, but my wife is a native from Detroit. And so, yeah, I got that for Christmas. You'll be seeing some new items show up on the channel with regards to merch. You probably, if you're paying attention, have seen that already. There's I think a mug available as well as a sticker. Nothing crazy, just trying to get the ball rolling on that. But as we get things moving, we'll also get some additional merchandise as well, like hats and shirts and sweatshirts and all that cool stuff. So with that being said, I want to kick it off initially with really just expressing why we're even doing this with regards to the channel initially and the response to Edwin. Now, you'll notice that I put a post 2 days ago. This is actually in a response to Roy Gane's interaction, the interview. I'll be very transparent. I was excited to maybe get something new. Most of the conversation was nothing new. It wasn't anything exciting. It was quite literally the same Adventist stuff, just kind of packaged in a little bit more of a academic, scholarly interaction. I do appreciate Gaines' attitude, his interaction. I really did appreciate the way he conversed. I think he's very respectable scholar. I think he's very respectful. So I appreciated that. And so my response here, along with this Patreon article, which you're welcome to engage with, those of you that are newer to the channel. If you're interested and if you want to support the channel, scan that QR code that's in the corner, and you'll get access to all the ways that you can connect. And one of the ways that you can is through Patreon. There will be additional things coming out that will be first going to Patreon. Then it will be also going to members of the YouTube channel itself. By the way, Jason, thank you for being the most recent subscriber to Patreon with your $10 a month subscription. So I appreciate that. That certainly does help in many, many, many ways. All right, so I want to do this. I just want to show you the interactions, and then I've got 6 points that I want to move through to help kind of the conversation. Once we're done with the response to Edwin, then we'll move into the actual episode 11, where we're dealing with the 70 weeks. This was the interaction that I had here with regards to my response. You'll notice as you scroll down here. By the way, those of you that do respond on YouTube, I really don't take anything off or remove comments unless they're ad hominem attacks. So, you know, if someone does show up and it ends up getting deleted, it's only because of that. I have no problem with critique. I appreciate it. So here's kind of the first interaction that Edwin does. There's a first, second, third interaction here. As a response to that, you'll notice that I give a response. You'll see, let me be more specific here. And then I give my response back and forth. I'm not going to read all this. This is a lot. You can go to obviously you can go to the post and read it. To which what I am going to respond to, because I haven't yet, is these responses here. So you'll see that ADL, Edwin, I'm assuming this is Edwin, okay? And Edwin, if you're here, great to have you. the response here is, his reply is, Daniel 8:13. He responds to my assertion that this is restrictive opposition. And he claims that that's not demonstrated. I'm going to talk about that in great detail. That might just be a big scholarly word. I'm going to talk about what it is. I'm going to read each of these as we interact, but I want you to be familiar with what it is that we're dealing with. And so I'll probably just engage back and forth on a couple of things. So the first point that I want to address here is Edwin's response to this Daniel 8:13, as I said, being restrictive opposition. And I will do my best to explain what that is exactly. But Edwin says this, you keep saying the Hebrew must restrict ha-hazan, which is ha is just the article, so the vision, to only cultic items. But even if we grant opposition does not automatically mean exclusion of the broader vision content. It can function as a specification of what aspect of the vision is in view, how long with respect to X, not the vision contains nothing else. Also, the text itself already framed the chapter as a single integrated vision. And I'm going to talk about this. This is a big part of the argument that Adventism makes. They've got to have the 2300 be the entire vision, and that's going to be really important for their argument. Then the angel asks, how long the vision? Daniel 8:13, and later refers back to the vision of the evenings, mornings, 8:26. This is exactly the pattern of vision-wide cohesion, not vision now equals only temple activity. We're going to talk about this in detail and respond to this. You treat thematic connection and grammatical scope as mutually exclusive. In apocalyptic literature or apocalyptic narrative, scope is commonly framed by the consequences being timed without erasing the wider vision that produces them. Okay, so he makes a very specific claim, and I want to walk through this. I want to walk through Daniel 8:13 with clarity. We're going to do it by walking methodically through. And so first, what I want to do, let me get Logos up on the screen real quick, and we'll work our way through this. By the way, thank you, those of you that voted on the poll for having this episode. It was super close. It was super close to being a Logos training episode. I promise you that's going to be coming. By the way, if you're interested in Logos, which is what it is that you have on the screen here, or if you want to know how to train on that, jump into Discord. I am an affiliate of Logos. I'm happy to kind of get you set up and things of that nature. Really, all that does as an affiliate is it allows me to purchase more books, which I am always wanting to purchase. I've already got 32,000 of them. But the power of Logos is not just in the features and the tools. It's also in having a massive library that your tools can kind of search through. And so if you are interested, yeah, let me know. So let's look at, let me kind of walk through Daniel 8:13. And this is going to be really important for Edwin's argument, but it's also the reason why I was greatly disappointed in the conversation with Roy Gane. So the verse says, then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one who spoke, for how long is this vision concerning the regular burnt offering? Now, I'm going to reference tamid. Tamid gets translated in multiple different ways in Hebrew. One of the arguments when I asked, the only question I asked on the show with Roy Gane was a question with regards to this word here. And it was I don't know, it was disappointing, I guess, to say the least, the response. But kind of the thing here is, well, tamid really, burnt isn't really in the translation. That's a translation. It's not really in the manuscript. And so it doesn't really need to refer to sacrifices. That's the claim. Okay. And while that is kind of honest to the text, you'll actually see here in the interlinear that these two do not have, the word is tamid that gets translated in the NRSV UE regular burnt offering. Okay. The sense, or the sense understanding of tamid depends on the context of the verse. And I'm going to show you all this as we go through it. You'll see it even up here, tamid, tamid, the regular burnt offering, or the regular offering, or just the offering together with the offering. If you wanted to translate it that way, it would be fine. There's a reason why translators translate it as regular burnt offering. Okay. And it's not just something that's happenstance or made up. So the key question that we really want to address and ask here is, does the grammar narrow what the vision, okay, what the vision refers to at this point in this chapter? And that's been my argument all along. Now we have 9 more episodes after this, so it's like we've got a lot more to deal with and a lot more to address. But that's been my argument. I think it does. I think the narrowing of the framework is theologically rich, and I'm going to unpack the linguistic mechanics behind that to kind of show how that makes sense from Daniel's apocalyptic flow and the narrative that he's moving through. And hopefully, as I explain why this matters for faith and interpretation, you'll see why I conclude what I conclude. Now, I have no problem agreeing that this is a complicated text. One of the things that I'll probably reference several times is, and I've said this before, even when we were on with Dr. Gladson, the unfortunate part for the Adventist interpretation is that the entire doctrine of the investigative judgment, which connects to the sanctuary doctrine, which connects to a lot of different things, okay, is 100% dependent from a starting point, okay? It starts with getting Daniel 8, 13, and 14 right. And this is kind of a theological no-no. You don't base doctrines on one obscure text that then builds out an entire framework, okay? Because, especially with apocalyptic literature, if it's inaccurate in one way or another, now, there's lots of points that it can go wrong. If it does, well, for my position, if I'm wrong in some area, okay, and it's my position, no harm, no foul, okay? I don't have a doctrine that's based on this, okay? If it's wrong for the Adventist perspective, it not only is wrong interpretively, but it messes with a slew of doctrines. Okay, so you can see why the stakes are so high. You can also see why Adventists will, just belligerently defend this, okay? Because it is very close to the heart and close to the vest for their overarching theological view. And so I understand that, but that doesn't mean it's right, okay? And we're going to address that as we go through this. Now, I want to address what is restrictive opposition, just to be very clear. I want you to think of restrictive opposition as the writer is putting a spotlight on a subset within a larger category. So again, if we go back to Daniel 8:13, notice that the Hebrew term, which Edwin brought up, okay, the vision, you'll see it there in verse 13. For how long is the vision? Okay, this is ha-hazon. So this term ha-hazon is immediately delimited by explanatory elements that specify the focus. This vision, what vision? It's very clear. It's the vision, what? Concerning this. So understand my argument, okay? Because the whole idea of restrictive opposition is, yes, there's a bunch of things that get discussed prior to here in a vision, okay? There's a lot that gets laid out. But when we get to verse 13 and 14 and we get zeroed in on a focal point, okay, the Holy One speaking, the Holy One says specifically, for how long is this vision? And then says exactly what the spotlight is. This is what we would call delimiting the explanatory elements. It specifies the focus of what is being dealt with. And what is being dealt with? Well, the tamid, okay? Concerning, now, granted, I don't have a problem if someone says, okay, well, I don't like the regular burnt part. Okay, fine. It's ha-tamid, okay? It's the offering, concerning the offering, okay? And it's probably more appropriate to understand this as the continual offering. Now, there's lots of translations. One of the easiest things to do is you don't even need to know Hebrew here. Just get like a half a dozen different English Bibles and just look at what the translators say. Okay, we can even do this for ourselves. Okay, if we go to here we go. For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering? This is the Lexham English Bible. What if we go to the New American Standard Bible? It says, how long will the vision about the regular sacrifice apply? Okay, so you're going to see differences here. The King James Bible, how long shall the vision concerning the daily sacrifice? Okay. What about, well, that's still the New King James. Here, the New King James Bible says daily sacrifices. What about the Net Bible? Okay. Well, the Net Bible says, to what period of time does the vision pertain? This vision concerning, and then it elaborates, the daily sacrifice and the destructive act of rebellion and the giving. Okay. So it doesn't take, there's no reason to try to get cute. We can. I mean, this is the reason why you get these different ways of explaining it. Okay. But ha-tamid deals with the offering that's in context. You're going to hear me say the cultic offering. It's an epexegetical move. The grammar itself defines and limits the scope. I've said this over and over and over again, and it's like Edwin, for some reason, thinks I'm just pulling this out somewhere. There's a couple of thoughts on this. In Hebrew, this is a very familiar device that gets used. Opposition that clarifies this part, not the whole. That's the whole idea of opposition. The following relative clause, okay, giving both the sanctuary and the host to be trampled, that is going to tighten the focus. It's like I think it was Wendy that we had on the show kind of used this like telescoping idea. You start broad, and then the text actually tells you what to focus in on. And that's really important. So the bottom line here is that the structure itself signals, and when I say structure, it's the contextual structure. We're exegeting this. We're not eisegeting. We're not saying it has to be X, Y, and Z. We're saying, what does the text, what does the grammar, what does the author say? Let him say what he says, okay? The question, how long, is going to target the desecration and the trampling sequence. It's not going to target, and it most certainly does not target, and I've said this so many times, and it's like every time I say it, somehow either someone at ADL or someone that supports ADL's enterprise comes up with some sort of similar response, okay, that it's the whole vision. Well, and again, this is why I was really actually quite frustrated and disappointed with respect with this and Dr. Gane, because he said the same thing. Like, here's the reality that I want everyone to understand. The Adventist position on this requires, this is an interpretive methodology. It demands that the 2300, it must encompass the entire vision. That's required. Now, it's textually not there, but it's again, it's claimed that that's the case. And when I say it's textually not there, it's because of this opposition that is a part of the grammatical structure. How long? And then what does it say? What does the text say? It's very clear. It says, for how long is this vision? What vision? Concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and this. How long is that? That's the honing in part. Okay. Now, to kind of knock this out of the park, and just as a response to Edwin, I'm going to give you a quick analogy, okay? From an English standpoint, imagine for a second that I would say, I watched the NFL game this last weekend. And then I said, the fourth quarter, when the defense collapsed, da-da-da-da-da. Or I watched, now if you did watch any of the games this last weekend, it would be, you might say, I watched the Rams and the Ravens. I think it was the Rams. I watched the Ravens. And in the last play of the fourth quarter, the kicker missed the kick. When I say that, I'm not talking about the entire game. That makes no sense. Okay? And so you're no longer summarizing the whole game. I'm not telling you that the whole game consisted of a missed kick. That's ludicrous. You know this just by understanding English. Okay? I'd be spotlighting a very decisive, very specific segment of the larger picture. That's what opposition grammatically does inside of the language here. So Daniel 8:13 works exactly like that. It's like saying, talks about the larger picture, and then he says the fourth quarter, the last little segment, how long? That's what's going on in the text. Now, I think I'm going to talk about some of the, maybe what it looks like on the other side of the aisle, okay? I think some possibly worry that spotlighting the grammar kind of fractures the unity of the vision. I think maybe that's the concern. I don't think that's the case, especially the more you study apocalyptic literature, because in apocalyptic literature, thematic unity and grammatical scope play on the same exact team. Daniel actually regularly moves from some sort of like panoramic scene to tightening the focus on like a climactic crisis or a point of judgment, or this is super common in apocalyptic literature. And again, I don't have a lens when I'm reading this, when I'm interpreting this. My lens doesn't require that I need to understand this in a certain way. And that's key, friends. Okay. This is part of the problem with interpreting text in general, not just apocalyptic text, just in interpreting scripture through the lens of tradition, whether that's any tradition. And I might step on some toes here, whether it's through the lens of the church fathers, or whether it's through the lens of, evangelical interpretations or reformed theology, or whatever it might be. It really doesn't matter. Okay. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't pay attention to those things. I think it's healthy to look at how, the history of Christianity has looked at certain things. I think that's healthy. But I don't think there's anything that demands, okay, that we have to see it in a specific tradition. There's nothing that demands it. And that's always the reason why I say I hold very loosely, okay, this is how I view it currently. I may make some changes. Don't be surprised if I make some adjustments as I study things, okay? I don't presume to know everything. But I do not think that the Adventist position on this is textually grounded. I have studied this for years, and I do not believe that to be the case. Okay. Let me kind of look at my notes here. Is there anything else I want to cover on this? There's a whole lot of stuff I wrote down. I mean, I've got stuff about like clause level gloss on Daniel 8:13. When I do this stuff, I tend to nerd out. Okay, we could talk about the literal translations, the way grammar structures together, all that stuff. You don't have to be a scholarly nerd in order to kind of be theologically grounded well in this. I would just say to any of you, be careful again when you're reading it through the lens of a tradition. Just be careful. Okay. Interesting question there, Fred. I wonder if Mike was ever an SDA Pathfinder. I was actually, by the way. I was a hardcore Pathfinder. I was an adventurer. I went to Camporee. I was all those things. So I was the ins and outs of all of it. What else? I'm going to talk about the connection to, let's do this. I want to give you some examples. Okay. I want to give you some, because yes, we're looking at Daniel 8:13 and 14. Okay. But I want you to see that this is something that is commonly done in other places in scripture. Okay. So let's go to Genesis 40 verse 5 real quick. So this is the captain of the guard charged Joseph with them, and he waited on them, and they called for the time in custody, sometime in custody. One night they both dreamed. Now, I want you to notice what happens in this. They both dreamed. And then what does it say? The cupbearer and the baker of the king who were confined in the prison, each his own dream, and each dream with its own meaning. So there is like they both dreamed, and then it hones in. They both had very specific dreams, and then it's going to lay out what those dreams are. Okay. That's an example in another passage where this type of thing pops up. Let me give you another example. Now, Genesis 40 is not an apocalyptic text. Okay, so they don't all function the same. Here's another example, and this is very different in its context. Okay, but notice that then he took his staff in his hand and chose 5 small stones from the wadi and put them in the shepherd's bag in the pouch. His sling was in his hand. Okay, this is what we call opposition. And in opposition, we have the sling, and then it's stated where that sling is. Okay, that's honing in. That's an example in the immediate scene, what's going on from an opposition standpoint. Let's go to Isaiah 1:13. Isaiah 1:13, you'll notice with regards to the incense, bringing offerings is futile. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath and calling of convocation, I cannot endure solemn assemblies with iniquity. Now, notice that this incense, okay, so bringing offerings is futile. And then it says, incense is an abomination to me. This incense is an abomination to me is the second element redefines and limits the evaluation of the scope. Okay, so you notice that bringing offerings is futile, and then what does it say? It hones in on the scope. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, incense. That incense is an abomination to me. Now, I'm not going to exegete this. This is an interesting one because we have both new moon and Sabbath in here. Your new moons and your appointed festivals. I am not going to get into a Sabbath conversation, but I want you to see that this is not something that is just tied to Daniel. Okay, this does pop up in several different places. Okay. What else do I want to say on this very first point? Yeah, I feel like I keep reiterating this stuff. Okay, let's kind of work through this. So, time formulas in Daniel. Okay, evenings and mornings, time, times, and a half a time. They function as spotlight durations. They don't re-narrate the whole historical arc, and that's my entire point. You can see this if you go to Daniel. Let's just go to another place in Daniel where we get this. Okay, Daniel 7:25. He shall speak words against the Most High, shall wear out the holy ones of the Most High, and shall attempt to change the ritual calendar and the law, and they shall be given into his power for what? Time, times, and a half a time. Now, the time, times, and a half a time, it frames the oppressive apex that's tied to the little horn. Now, I get the Adventists like to do all kinds of stuff with these things. They have their own kind of proof texting and methodology that they move around. My point is to show you that this is an example of kind of spotlighting durations. Okay. Daniel 8:14 is an example, as we already talked about. Daniel 12:7 when we get into multiple periods that are triangulated with the crisis horizon and its solution. You got verse 7, you got verses 11 and 12. For the time that the regular burnt offering, there you go, there's that tamid, okay, is taken away and the desolating sacrilege is set up, there it shall be. And then it gives you a telescoping kind of connection there. It hones in, okay? Revelation is going to do this. So there's lots of different places that this gets done. Now let me kind of address before I get on to the next point, okay? Sorry, I'm looking at some of these comments here that I'll put on the screen. Yeah. Daniel 7 is what James from Advent Media Connect used to prove Sunday is the mark of the beast. I just don't understand the. I don't get the horrible twisting of the Word of God. So let me address a concern and then I'll move on to point 2. We've got several points and I'm just methodically moving through here and then we'll get into the second half of the conversation. So here's what we're not doing. In my position, I'm not amputating the rest of the vision. That's not what goes on here. Instead, what we're doing is we're reading the grammatical signals in the text that come from the text, not that I'm inserting on the text, okay? And we're paying attention to those signals, the opposition and the relative clause, the answer, how long, okay? That question is delimiting the trampling sequence. That's what it's talking about, okay? By the way, Rodney, I really hate to do this to you, but you need to I'm just going to put you on timeout. You're welcome to be here for the show, but it's super distracting when people just like, get on with it. This is an addressing to Edwin's comment. So welcome to the show. If you don't want to be here, just jump out, come back in an hour. Okay. And maybe we'll be in it at that point. Okay. It irritates me. And I'll just say this because, it always happens. It's a privilege. Whether or not you think it's a privilege to be on this channel commenting. I have no problem. Just blocking you so that you can't comment. You can just show up and you can watch. I have no problem with that. Okay. So I keep saying this. It's a privilege. It is not a right to be able to comment on this channel. And so if you do 1 or 2 or 3 of them, I'm going to get tired of it and I'm just going to shut it off. That's just the way I am. I just don't have time for all of your baloney. Okay. So show up, be respectful, be scholarly in your approach, engage in the interactions, and you're welcome to be here. We're glad you're here. Okay. I feel like I'm putting kids in timeout when I have to time out people. All right, let's jump back in. Okay. So let's go to point 2. Let's just address point 2. And this is the question that Edwin brought up. Okay. The comment here that he makes with regards to the vav, and that's a W, transliterated W in the Hebrew. He says this: you bring up that Genesis 1 uses Areb Bokur with a vav, but Daniel 8 uses Areb Bokur without vav. Therefore, Daniel is sacrificial cycles. This is a neatly combined, and Edwin likes to do this. All of these fallacies and all these proper, this is like apologetic language where people like to logically argue through, and you can and can't do this. Okay. This is a neatly combined non sequitur with eisegesis. Now, we're going to see about that, okay? Even if Daniel 8 discusses the tamid, it does not follow that the number counts sacrifices. Daniel never says 2,300 sacrifices. Okay. All right. Side note, okay? If you're going to use that language and that logic, the Bible never says Trinity either. Okay. This is the type of like laughable logic that just makes no sense when people say this stuff. Okay. It never says 2,300 tamid and never provides the numerical sacrificial accounting premise you insert. We'll see. That inference, and that's the claim he makes, that inference is not contextually demanded. An Adventist Hebrew scholar, and then he quotes it. He does put this, and I have yet to read through it. I will read through this article, although I will say this just in passing. Hey, Edwin, if you're listening, how about you engage in scholars outside of Adventism? That would make you actually well-rounded. Try that. Okay? Because anyone can provide a scholar that supports their own system. Like anyone can do that. Okay? That's not grounded academic pursuit. That just isn't. Okay? It's just, well, it's tooting your own horn, whatever you want to call it. It's supporting your own premise. Okay? Special pleading. It's a plead to authority, whatever you want to call it. Okay. But this Adventist Hebrew scholar interacts directly with this exact question and argues that this 1150 sacrifice days reading does not follow the Hebrew and that Rebuttal functions as a time unit modeled in Genesis 1. I'm going to get to Genesis 1. Okay. Not a sacrificial ledger. I'll post the link. Okay. So let's address his statement. Yes, I agree, Schley. Okay. Okay. So let's kind of work through the question. So there's a couple of things that Edwin brings up. The first question is and really what I'll address is what does Rebuttal mean? Okay. In Hebrew. And so when we encounter this phrase, let's go to Daniel 8. Okay. What does Rebuttal mean? Now, this is evenings and mornings. And I want you to understand his statement and what's going on. Okay. The evening, morning. If you translate this literally, there is no vav. You'll see that in the middle here, which is a conjunction, the wa, the W-A-W. Okay. And I'll show you where it pops up. It's right. We can find it up here, okay? You'll see lots of ands. It's this mark right here, okay? It's, I believe, the sixth letter. I think it's the sixth letter. I'm still trying to get used to and try to understand the Hebrew language. So I believe it's that, okay? But it's this W down here that gets transliterated W. And the argument here is that, well, it's not present, okay? You'll see Boker, you'll see Areb, Boker, number 6, number 7 in the manuscript, reading right to left. And 100%, you're right. It's not present, okay? The instinct is to ask whether the conjunction, this and, is it present? And if not, okay, whether that absence kind of clinches some sort of semantics or like it makes the argument for him. And he claims it does, okay, but it doesn't. I'm going to explain why, okay? Hebrew syntax regularly encodes meaning through word order. It can do it through construction. It can do it through context. The presence or absence of this conjunction is not a switch that somehow like toggles on and off literal day versus cultic cycle. Like that's not what's going on here. Again, that's just an inaccurate understanding, and maybe you just didn't understand my argument. I'm not sure. Okay, but what I'm trying to get at is this conjunction is not determinative. It isn't what determines whether something is cultic or is not. It's literal or it's not. Okay. It's one cue among many that has to be interpreted with inside the discourse. There's two observations that I want to look at. There's two things I want to pay attention to and kind of help ground us. The first is what we would call syntactical significance. The conjunction wa presents or whether it's present or absence cannot bear the entire semantic load of the interpretation. That's not the way it works. Hebrew oftentimes will lean on contextual specifications. It'll look at lexical fields, narrative focus, parallel usages, and it'll look at those things to do kind of the heavy lifting. There's much more that's going on in this text than, oh, it doesn't have the conjunction and, oh, therefore it's literal and it's a unit of time. No, that's not the case. Okay. The second thing I would say is contextual determinants. So Daniel 8, the whole chapter is saturated with cultic markers. When I say cultic, I'm talking about like temple sacrifice. I'm talking about sanctuary, things that deal with, when I say cult or cultic, it's the Israelite community and their sacrificial system, their cult system. Okay. Cult just means that they were serving a god, that god being Yahweh, and the cultic rituals were the rituals that kind of functioned inside of their interactions, okay, between them and God and Yahweh. That's the world that evening morning naturally maps into. Okay. Now, I'll say it another way. You would have to give me contextual reasons to conclude that Daniel is stepping outside of the drenched temple sanctuary language that is entirely dipped in cultic ritual. That's the entire connection of the chapter, okay? All right. So let's read kind of the context of Daniel 8, okay, and why I think sacrificial cycles fit. The passage, the gravitational center of this passage, let's get back to the screen share here. The gravitational center of this passage, if you look at the beginning of the passage, chapter 8, where it tells you at the beginning of, and then there's this kind of description of this in vision. This is what he saw. You get to the middle point here, right here in 13 to 14. This central part, this is like the, I wouldn't say there's a chiasm or a chiastic structure going on here, but this is like the spotlight, the central kind of element. It's intentionally sandwiched in the middle with, on the other side, it kind of explains, again, I had seen the vision, I tried to understand it, and then you get kind of the description of on the other side. And then we get into chapter 9, which is an entirely different vision. Okay. This isn't incidental. In cultic framework, when we're talking about this section right here, in cultic framework, evening, morning were significant, if I said to you as an Israelite, okay, if I said Areb and Bokur, the evening morning had weight to it. It either in context had weight to something like creation account, because it is tied to that, okay, or it's cultic in that it would immediately cue you to what was happening with significance in the evening and mornings with regards to the sacrifices. Okay. So anytime we would get like regular offerings or continual or anything of that nature, it's going to be tied pretty exclusively to the cultic side. So how long? Well, within this sanctuary bound context, Areb Bokur definitely coheres most naturally to this 2 daily offerings. Okay. Is the entire vision, let me ask this, is the entire vision about the regular burnt offering? Or if you don't like the regular burnt, is the entire vision about the tamid? Is it about the offering? Well, we know that's not the case. Okay. Because if you look at the entire vision, it deals with all these empires. Okay. All right. So the Torah, when we look at the Torah at large, the Torah, and when I say Torah, okay, by the way, exciting side note. Do I have it in here? I don't think I brought it in here. I have a new book I'm reading through. I'm a quarter of the way through. It's on the law. It's a brand new book. In fact, it sold out at the SBL conference that I was not able to be at. But the scholar has agreed that he's going to come on and do a show here about the law. I am learning that we as modern Christians, and this is pretty much a broadly transparent and true statement. Most Christians view the law from a penal, disciplinary, democratic. If you're in America, but even if you're not, like most of the time when we think of law, we think of you do something right or wrong, and if you do it wrong, then there's some sort of a discipline. I am learning that is actually entirely foreign to the Israelite understanding of law. So we'll get to that. I bring that up because when we talk about the Torah is just a general term for the law or instruction. Okay. The Torah provides the crucial precedence for reading Areb Bokur as sacrificial cycles. Now, I want you to notice something in the text. Okay. When I make a statement about, okay, evenings, mornings, notice Areb Bokur. Now, yes, okay, we have no and or conjunction in the manuscript. Okay. Let's go to Exodus for a second. Exodus 29:38. Here we have Bokur, we have Areb. Okay. Areb down here. Or evening down here, Areb. Okay. This is connected. Now just pay attention to 2 lambs day by day continually. What does it say? Okay. 2 lambs, a year old regularly. Now notice what the word is here. Tamid. Regularly each day. One lamb you shall offer morning, one you shall offer evening. Now, here's what I don't understand. This is more closely contextually supported to what Daniel would be thinking than anything. Okay. It's a template for tamid. You don't have to interpret tamid as regular offering because it's already in the context here. Okay. It means continual offering. That's what tamid is. Okay. Each day you've got yom there. Now I want you to pay attention. Okay. This is a really good example text because this yom is day. If it was 2,300 days, it would have yom. It's specifically morning, evening. Adventists like to say, well, that means a day, and then they go back to Genesis. No, friends. That's it's not only frustrating, okay, but it's comical. Now let's look at Numbers 28, 3 and 4. Here's another example. This is the offering. Okay. There's a lot of regular offering. That's tamid olah. Okay. Tamid olah. And here we have morning. That's bokur. And then over here, it gets translated as, this is a reb. It gets translated as twilight because that really is like morning, evening. That was when the sacrifices occurred. Okay. So anytime you see this, again, I'm hoping that you're understanding that when what is in view is the sanctuary, if the sanctuary is in view, then you automatically understand that when it's talking evening, morning, it's positioning that within the tamid, the regular offerings. Like this is something that culturally would be present. It doesn't have to literally be there. Okay. All right. Now, here's what I want to be really precise on as we get out of point 2. And I want to be fair about this, okay? Edwin's critique on this particular part, I don't have a problem with him noticing that there's what I would call syntactical variation, okay? It's always funny to me when you're dialoguing on particular issues in the text and someone goes, well, you're not being consistent. You said this over here and that over there. Well, you don't always have to be consistent. There is movement. There is actually variation in the way you would understand some of this, okay? But what I do want to mention that Edwin does, his response and his method, I think, leans too hard on a single grammatical feature. Okay. Oh, the conjunction. And it relies too little on the discourse context. Okay. He knows that he needs to be in context. He knows it's important to be in context. I know that because he said it before. Okay. He actually picks on people that he thinks aren't in context. But he doesn't rely on, in this instance, the context of the discourse. Okay? Yeah, conjunctions matter. You're right, Edwin. They do matter, but they aren't like pinpointed. I mean, Edwin's approach actually, I think, risks grammatical autonomism, treating one particular thing as like the decisive, absolute, like semantical pivot. Like if it's not this, it's not this. Okay. So that's probably the way I would argue. Now he does make a statement in this, and this is another kind of rebuttal that I would say. Is the sacrificial cycle, is that reading eisegesis? He makes a claim that I was committing eisegesis. I don't have a view that I have to have on, okay? So no, it's not eisegesis. Okay. Eisegesis is taking an idea and inserting or demanding that idea of the text. Okay. It's taking an outside concept and applying that on the text rather than letting the text percolate up the concepts and you're deriving the ideas directly from what the text is saying rather than the other way around. So in contextual exegesis, if we go back to our text that we're on, Daniel 8:13, okay? Then I heard a holy one speaking, and another holy one said to the one speaking, "For how long is the vision concerning the tamid?" Okay, the regular, that's really what it would be, the regular, the regular offering, the sacrifices, okay? The transgression that makes desolate and the giving over of the sanctuary and the host of the trampled. The Daniel 8:13 anchors the inquiry in tamid. That's where it's anchored, is in the tamid. The cultic frame actually, to me, it narrows. When I say cultic frame, the concept that this is dealing with sacrificial cycles is, I think it's not only plausible, but it's contextually plausible because the verse is anchored in tamid, which is the regular offering. So if it's the sanctuary and you got the regular offering and then you have the answer with the evening and mornings, it's grounded in the text. Now, the calculation that 2300 evening morning equals 1150, which is two offerings per day. Okay, that's the way it gets that. So you get 2300 evening morning, which connects to, and this is where you get the days. That would connect to 1150 days because there are two offerings per day. Okay, that is not arbitrary. Now, you may not agree with that. Okay, there are several ways that people kind of create or interpret what this might be. Okay, that's not arbitrary. There's a reason for it because I believe that tamid is grounding the actual sacrificial cycles. Evenings and mornings deals with the sacrifices that are one in the evening, one in the morning. There's 2300 of them, which connects to 1150 days. Okay. That's the logic. It's embedded in the text. Now, if you really want to talk about this, my response back would be, there's absolutely nothing in the text. There's nothing in this text that says years. There's nothing. Okay, so if you're grounding it in the immediate context of the vision, what's being asked, there's nothing in the language that dictates it to be years. Okay, you might say 2300 days. I don't think that's right. I think it's 2300 evening mornings. Okay, I think that's accurate because that is what Bokur and Areb mean. And then from there, I think it would be accurate because of the grounding of tamid to say it's 1150 days. Now, I don't need it to be that. Okay, let me be very clear. I don't need it to be that. You could probably convince me that it might be some of the other potentials. The one that you can't convince me of, because it's the least likely, it's the most horrendously abusive of the text, is the 2300 years. Okay. And that, to me, I mean, you want to talk about eisegesis. That's eisegesis. Okay. Now, there is historical corroboration on this, which is another point that we'll just kind of bring up quickly here. If you go to, and this was another point that he brought up, he was claiming that my statement about about Maccabees wasn't accurate and it wasn't exactly in the text. Oh, Edwin, do we have to explain every granular detail to you? Maccabees 4:52 to 54, early in the morning on the 25th day of the 9th month. That's Chislev. In 148th year, you get the exact year. Okay, this is Maccabees. They rose and offered sacrifice as the law directs on the new altar of burnt offering. Okay, that they had built. Now this connected with, I'll show you the other one. Okay, Maccabees 10:15 or 10:5. It happened on the same day on which the sanctuary had been profaned by the foreigners. The purification of the sanctuary took place. That is on the 25th day of the same month, which was Chislev. Okay, they celebrated in the 8th day, and it talks about the festival of Booth. This is Hanukkah. Okay, and it gives you all the details. Now, these two texts are a witness to the period, the period, the restoration memory, okay, the time period, how long, that aligns with the halved count, the 2,300 offerings, total offerings, evening, morning, 1,150 days. That indicates that the early readers, okay, with liturgical proximity, they would understand this. They would perceive what Daniel is talking about, the numbering through the lens of the tamid cycle. Okay. Now, I wish that Edwin, as well as Dr. Gaines, would engage in scholarship around this. They don't. Okay. Now, I'm more convinced that maybe Gaines would be willing to, because I got to give him credit. I think he's a scholar. And so I would assume that he does engage in other stuff, but I have yet to see him engage, and I was disappointed when he engaged in this. Now, I'm going to show you one other thing with regards to this. Okay. You guys have seen me use this before. This is just a little bit of how Logos kind of helps with regards to study. I just want to kind of set a side note here, because we were talking about the conjunction, and one of the things that he addressed is how it was used and how conjunctions kind of flip the switch on and off and whatever. He made that argument. So anytime I'm like, hey, is that the case? Okay, let me see what other scholars say about it. Okay. I'm just going to ask, this is the study assistant, and the way this works is this is AI, but it is integrated inside of my Logos. It's only going to communicate with the 33,000 books that I have. It does not go out on the web. It doesn't read anything from out on the web. Okay. And then it's going to give me a response, and it's going to give me the exact books that I would want to look at to engage in this. So I would say, that's the conjunction in Hebrew, and how does it get used? Okay. And I want you to see how this functions. Okay. And it's way more complicated than Edwin kind of leads on to. Okay. The conjunction is the letter W in biblical Hebrew and serves to indicate events happening in sequence. Now, here's the quote for this. This is in a book by Ian and Paul. It functions as both a letter and grammatical connector with remarkably diverse applications. And then they're going to go through, okay? Notice that you can have it as a conjunction, a narrative device. It's going to explain how this works. Conjunction conjoins nouns as at the phrasal level, and also conjoins clauses. The conjunction is highly flexible. One translation tool renders the conjunction over 50 different ways. This is not a simple on-off switch. Oh, it's literal, or oh, it's symbolic or cultic, sacrificial, whatever. Like, that's not the way this works. Okay. Then you have in narrative device. So it's used differently in narrative than it is so it's differently in prose. It's differently in poetry. It just gets used differently. Here we have the while consecutive plus an imperfect. construction, it places the conjunction before the imperfect verb as the first letter of the word, and this grammatical device regularly indicates the progression of events and sequences. Okay. Now, I'm showing you this just because I need you as the audience, and I need Edwin to understand that this is a call up. If you're going to engage in this kind of stuff, I need you to engage in good academic studies, good resources, good tools. Okay. We can no longer just me and my Bible. Okay. If you're going to engage in these types of discourse and dialogue, then it's best that we do it in a way that honors the text, in a way that kind of engages in the academic world. That's my argument. Okay, that's what I'm trying to accomplish. Okay, maybe that's not what ADL is trying to accomplish, and I get it if ADL is just about, Edwin, if all you want to do is kind of prop up the Adventist system and defend the system, I get it if that's your mission. Okay, but you're not going to convince me if you're not willing to engage in the response and the academic scholarship on the other side of the aisle. It'd be no different than, I've had people tell me, hey, you can't just use Dr. Heiser, or you can't just use John Walton, or you can't just use whatever it might be to defend your case. You're right. Okay. So it's important that we utilize tools that are kind of supporting us in the proper way. And so here's kind of a follow-up to that. In prose, the conjunction is the workhorse of clause chaining. So you get this string of advanced storyline, right? This and this and this. It's the simple. I know. I'm trying to be kind. Okay. I'm convinced, I don't disagree with you. I'm convinced that is the purpose of the channel. Okay. If the purpose of the channel is to just strictly defend Adventism at all costs, well, then you're not going to get a lot of respect from me. Because there's lots of arguments out there that just absolutely destroy Adventist positions. Okay. And if you don't have any response for it, if it's just parroting the same stuff over and over and over and over and over again, and then bringing in a scholar that's going to parrot the same thing. I know that these guys can't say, you know what, it doesn't really matter. Like, I'd be okay with that. Edwin, if you want to say, hey, you know what, it doesn't really matter. If you view it, this way or that way, it doesn't really matter. It's complex. I'd be okay with that. Okay. I'm okay with that. I don't think that we have to get it exactly right with precision. I don't think so. Okay. I think that we need to make sure that we're not horribly off. And I would say the Adventist position for sure on this is, it stems out of a false premise, and that is that William Miller thought that it dealt with the end of time. And then from there had to be a course correction. That's the reality of the situation. Okay. Now the conjunction that we're dealing with, and this, it says in the response here, okay, notice you have as a narrative device, structural function. Okay. This is how the conjunction gets used. Phonetic roles and how they get used. Now, again, you can read through this. Okay. This is the stuff I do all the time. Okay. When someone makes a claim, whether it's, on an Adventist channel or a non-Adventist channel, when they make a claim, I'm going to come in and I'm going to research it. Most of the time, the claims that happen online are not backed with any kind of academic support. They just don't have any rigor to them. They're just people's opinions. When it comes to poetry and you're using conjunction, okay, the distribution is more varied. You have like line parallelism, ellipsis, you have a syndeton. It frequently replaces overt conjunctions. You have, and while sometimes semantic cohesion is carried by imagery in poetry, you have it carried by imagery, parallelism, what's called phonology, phonology, certain patterns, okay, that gather kind of around certain ideas more than connective particles. If you want to know a lot about poetry, I tell you the best person to do lots of reading from is Robert Alter. In fact, if you look at right behind, right here, that set of books, that's the Tanakh with the three kind of different organized parts of the Tanakh. The Ketuvim, forget all the names of them, okay? I'm drawing a blank. That is actually Robert Alter's translation. And his commentary. Robert Alter's kind of big claim to fame is he has done a massive amount of work on poetry. Okay. Yeah. So, all right. And here we get the fun. All right, Edwin. I'm here to tell everyone why. You want to know why? I'm happy to share. I'm happy to share. I'm glad you asked, actually. Okay. Why do I prefer to do these types of responses instead of just debating you? I love this question. Thank you for asking. Okay. So the reason is a couple of reasons. Okay. First of all, you don't really have my respect to do a debate. First of all. Okay. Partly because, and I've said this multiple times, I don't know if you hear it or not, but I've told you this multiple times, Edwin. I'm not convinced that you would be gracious. I'm not convinced that you would be kind. I'm not convinced that you would be well-meaning. I'm just not, okay? And so I'm not convinced that coming onto your channel and debating is valuable. I don't know that that's valuable. Okay. Part of the reason I think that this is more valuable, and the reason I have refrained as to now, is because it's easier for the audience to actually see the arguments and to process the arguments by looking at articles or by actually seeing what's written out in your line of thinking versus my line of thinking. I don't have any desire to convince you to change. Okay. You have made a very clear decision to defend Adventism. That's fine. Defend it. Okay. But most of the time, the only debates that are valuable, in my opinion, are ones that are properly moderated, ones that that have very specific questions that are addressed. They're prepared. The topic is picked, and the questions that are going to be addressed are picked. The last time that I told you I would actually engage with you on Sabbath, my statement was, hey, I need you to read all this stuff. And your response was, yeah, I don't really have time to read all that stuff. Why would I read all of it? Well, then you're not going to understand my perspective. Okay. Part of the reason a person does a debate is not necessarily to prove the other person wrong. That's not the function of the debate. The purpose is to see the lines of argument on both sides of the table. That's the purpose. Okay. And so if you don't understand my line, my perspective, then how are you going to properly respond to my lines of argument? Half the time I'd be explaining things to you, which is what I have to do in responses like this. Okay. What I would be way more interested in is lining up a conversation between Roy Gane and Jerry Gladson. That would be way more valuable because they're both respected scholars on both sides of the aisle, and they're both kind. Okay. And Edwin, I understand that. Okay. I totally get. I know you want to have an honest debate. The problem is, here's the problem. The problem is I haven't been convinced that that's something that you can do. So trust is a two-way street. I'm sorry. You just said you don't want my respect. Well, you don't have it. Okay. So I will engage in your lines of argument here. This is the way it's going to work. And that's just the way it is. Okay. I don't know that I want to give you I want to say pleasure of having a conversation like that with me. I just, because you're not using the same tools. You're not using the same acumen. You're not approaching the conversation in the same way, in my opinion. So I'd be happy to line up. I'd be happy to line up a conversation between Jerry Gladson and Roy Gane. I think that'd be great. Okay. So that being said, that's what it is right now. Okay. It's no different than, like, I'll just throw this out there. Kevin Morgan, for example, lost all of his ability to ever have a conversation with me on my channel, ever. Okay. There reaches a point at which, okay. And I've had lots of counsel from lots of people with regards to interacting with a debate, with you, Edwin, and the counsel from multiple people all over have been, don't have it, because he says he wants to have an honest debate, but it's not. So that's the rapport that you've gotten. And that's on you, man. That's not on me. Okay. It's not what this channel is about. And so I respond at a distance. I engage respectfully about the things that you state. And that's the way it's going to be. Okay. For the time being. So if you do want to pursue maybe getting Roy Gane and Jerry Gladson, if the two of them are willing, I think that would be very valuable for the audience. And I'd be happy to have that on my channel. I'd be happy to. Okay. All right, let's get in. We're already an hour and a half in. You know what? I may not get to all these points. Okay. Let me get to point 3 here, and let me read the point that was made on point 3. Here's the comment that Edwin made, and I want to address. Okay. Your second Maccabees citation is wrong. It does not state 3 years before. I'm going to address that. Okay. You wrote, and this is a quote, 2 Maccabees 10:5 explicitly states the purification occurred 3 years before the profanation. But 2 Maccabees 10:5 says the opposite. It says the purification happens on the same day anniversary the sanctuary was profaned. There is no 3 years before statement in that verse. Likewise, 1 Maccabees ties desecration and rededication to the same calendar year, which implies an anniversary framework. Again, not a 3.2 year or 1,150 day arithmetic scheme. Now, it's interesting to me that you actually threw this in, because there is a connection there. Okay. But let's address this. Let's just call it what it is. Okay. Let's look at the actual texts. Okay. Let me just share on keeping the text in context. It all begins with, let's go to Maccabees. Now, we already read this. Okay. We were already very clear. We read Maccabees. Okay. 2 Maccabees 10:5. I'm not going to read it all again. This is the actual text. I would probably come down to about right here. Okay. 4 through 5. Okay. 2 Maccabees 10 verse 5 specifically reports that the purification was celebrated for 8 days on the same day the temple had been profaned. That's explicitly what the text is saying. Now, I'm not arguing, pay attention, Edwin. I am not arguing that the exact phrase 3.5 years has to be there. Just like I would never argue, and I'm glad you're here now, I don't think you would ever argue that in order for us to believe in the Trinity, Trinity has to be there, literally. Okay? So like this is really irritating when people make these like, well, it's not exactly there. Okay. All right. Let's roll with it. Okay. The temporal markers, it's very clear. The temporal markers in this text, they are deliberate. They are signaling. This is a historical document. They are signaling calendrical identity rather than just mere proximation. And I know that some here, this is a challenge for apocalyptic literature, okay? And this is a big challenge for the modern viewer, modern Christian interpreter. We like things to be exact. We like it to be exact. Okay? Hey, Edwin, you notice right down here what the history book says? I mean, I don't like, I don't know how else to like, it's in the text. Okay. Maccabees is very clear. Such then was the end of Antiochus, who was called Epiphanes. So do the math, as you already stated. Okay. You were already very clear in your statement. You acknowledged in your own statement, okay, that this was a part, this 3.2, that you already stated that from this calendar year, okay, all the way back, okay, that you identified that, yeah, that's there's a time frame there, right? That's the time frame that's in the text. It's not rocket science, okay? Maccabees is claiming that this date right here that happened on the same day of the profaning of it, back 1000, back 1100 to 1150 days prior, okay? That same time, that period was the end of Antiochus. Like, you're the one that's going to have to argue outside of this, okay? It's like, in other words, the rededication, it mirrors the desecration date, which anchors the meaning in that. I don't know how to make it any clearer. Okay. I can, okay. Let me say it this way. So the date, the 25th of Kislev, that's the date that Maccabees claims dedication. That's the date. Okay. The event that happened on that date was the rededication of the temple after it had been profaned. The framing of it is a commemoration of the restoration. Notice what the text back in Daniel 8, 13, 14 says at the end. Then it will be restored. Adventists like to say cleansed. Restored to its rightful position. That's exactly what this is saying. Such was the end. It was restored. So I'm anchoring this in history. That's what I'm anchoring it. There's no historical documents that are claiming that this is 2,300 years starting on 457 that ties to 1844. Oops, I thought it was 1843 and then it was 1840. No, that's an anachronistic false date setting that William Miller connected, that nothing happened. Absolutely nothing happened. There's nothing in the text. Okay. History tells us that this is what is connected. It's the rededication. It's the restoration. Justice was restored in the sanctuary where it was trampled. It's very clear. It says they celebrated the purification of the temple for 8 days on the same day on which it had been profaned. It's pretty clear. So to make the argument that it's not explicitly in the text, well, okay, fine. Like, you're right. 3.5 years isn't, 3.2 isn't in the text. But I mean, this is another reason why I would have a hard time debating you. Because it's like, this is really, you want to have that discussion? No, I don't want to have that discussion. It's very clear in the text. Okay. It very explicitly links the original profanation date, and then it links it to the restoration. I mean, I don't know how to be any clearer on this particular point. Okay. All right. Let's just quickly move through some of these others. Let's go just for the sake of time, because we're going to run out of time for sure at this rate. Let's go to the next item here. Okay. Number 4, moving the goalpost. Okay. Your original argument, as you first framed it, leaned on exactly matching Antiochus' desecration. Now, when the math doesn't land cleanly and you are challenged, you pivot to apocalyptic numbers are stylized around round figures. Now, again, this is another example of why I would have a hard time debating you, because it's clear to me, Edwin, that you aren't aware of apocalyptic literature. You haven't spent much time actually in it. You spend more time learning how to defend the Adventist position. But you can't have it both ways, is what he goes on and says. If it exactly matches, then you must show actual historical. Again, he's saying like it's either this way or it's that way. Okay. If it's stylized rounding, then the exactly matching claim is withdrawn, and you no longer have a strong tether to 1,150. Also, stylized rounding does not rescue the internal mismatch. And he goes on and explains that, while the Maccabean sources emphasize an anniversary pattern, same day language. Okay, well, at least you acknowledge, I'll say this, at least you acknowledge that it does emphasize this. I appreciate that. Okay, that further solidifies what we actually talked about just a second ago. So let me set the stage here again. The question is now, we can all agree, I hope we can all agree that Daniel, specifically these chapters of Daniel, are apocalyptic in genre. Okay. The question then becomes, how do apocalyptic numbers function alongside historical events, especially around the Maccabean period? How does this function? Now, Edwin claims it's either one or the other. Okay. That's what he claims. It has to be one or the other. I don't agree with that. I don't think it actually is that clean. I don't think apocalyptic texts are that clean. Okay. Now, when we're talking about dates with apocalyptic texts, we're actually dabbling in two different modes at once. We're dabbling in history. We're also dabbling in symbolism. I think most of you would agree that we have symbolism in Daniel, right? Like with regards to the beasts, like we know that symbolism, right? It doesn't have to be exact. Like we know that. Okay. You're absolutely right that we should be demanding consistency. Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that. I wish you'd take your own medicine and be more consistent with your own arguments. Okay. 2,300 years is not consistent textually. I wish you would admit it. It'd be more honest from an interpretation standpoint to just say, we don't get this from the text. It would be more honest just to say that we take this as a precedence to Adventist history. Ellen White made this claim, and so this is the way we view it. Like that would be more honest with the reality of how Adventists got to the conclusion that they've gotten to. But to then argue that everything is textually grounded and there isn't anything in the text, that's inconsistent. Okay? You're just searching for things. Like I don't really need to remind you all, but let's not forget that there's very clear historical windows here. December 167 to December 164. If you look at that, the rough period of time between the dates given historically, okay, December 167 BC to December 164 is roughly 1100 to 1150 days. That spread, when I say roughly, that's not a flaw. There is an expected wiggle room. I know that the text has 1,150. If you do half, I get it. I understand. Okay. But these types of numerology don't have to always have the exact precision that you require of it in order to mean what it is that the vision is intending to mean. It can mean just a completed period of time that's around this time period. That's what it can mean. Okay. There is wiggle room. Okay. So to argue for exactness is going to get the same thing back for me. I need exactness in the text that it says 2,300 years. I need exactness. You can't have it either way. You can't demand that of me either. So anytime you have terms like 2,300 evening mornings, as apocalyptic genre signals, they effectively compress history into some sort of a symbolic total. It can't be a symbolic total that encompasses like, oh, it's going to be like centuries later. Okay. There's practically none. There's a few that you could argue, like millennium, I think was brought up. Okay. Depending on how you see that. And yes, this is absolutely right. Okay. Adventists believing that there's a literal 1,000 years. It's kind of a poor argument. Okay. This whole idea that, they're going to reign for exactly 1,000 years after, this happens and this happens. And that's the same mess from an interpretation standpoint that got William Miller in trouble. That's the same thing. That's not the way this stuff works. Okay. I think it's well grounded in the text historically to conclude that Antiochus is the little horn, and the conclusion of the desecration relating to what we're talking about in Daniel 8 is the restoration based on Maccabees. Like I think that's it doesn't take too much to conclude that. Okay. I'm not gonna go through. I was going to talk about evening, morning as it connected to Genesis, because that's usually a pretty common thing that comes up. In fact, it came up in Roy Gane's argument. I really want to get into the last part of the conversation. Let me just skip to the fifth. I want to make sure I cover all these as best I can. The fifth one here, Maccabees, links 3 years to Daniel's numbers, is asserted, not shown. You claim that this and this, these are the passages we looked at, explicitly link exactly 3 years to Daniel's prophecy, and that was reflected awareness of Daniel's numbers. But those passages, as cited, discuss dates and rededication, not 2,300. This is, I almost don't even want to engage in. This is not really a great argument. I'm going to engage in it, but it's not a great rebuttal to what I was saying. But so what you have is, and then the quote here, they describe 3 years. Therefore, they are interpreting Daniel's 2,300. That's inference. So he claims that it's inference, not explicit linking. I think you're overstating things here and arguing by implication rather than anything explicit. Again, this is the thing. Adventists really like, it's got to be explicit. It's got to be explicit, or they just deflect it. Okay. Well, I could say that with a lot of things in Adventist interpretation if you want to go there. So here's the bottom line that he says: your case currently requires A, a contested linguistic jump. We already covered this. B, a miscitation. Claim that. I already refuted that. A retreat from the exact match when pressed. And then he makes this it's kind of like a passive aggressive statement, as if like, I don't really know what you meant by this, Edwin, because it kind of felt like, and maybe I'm telling myself the wrong story, but it kind of feels like when these statements are said, it kind of feels like, oh, you've left and you've gotten dumber. Like it kind of feels like that. Like, oh, is this how you do it? You know, you left the truth, and is this now, like, this is the best you can give us? Like, oh, you got stupider. You know, that's kind of the way it comes across. I don't know that that's the way you meant it, but I think it's important for people to know how things get taken. Okay. So let's see here. How do I want to respond to this? Okay, so there's 3 claims here. The Maccabean sources, okay, don't explicitly link. I think I dealt with that pretty clearly. The 3-year description is merely inferential. Yeah. No. The citation is misleading. No, it's not. So let me just, I don't want to go back through I think we already made enough evidence that the sources actually make the statement. Okay. I wasn't misquoting anything. Okay. So the takeaway on the actual citations, listen, he hasn't said that. I have had Adventists claim that about me. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know that you're wrong. Okay. Here's the takeaway for the first point. The Maccabean history does not quote Daniel word for word. You're absolutely right. It's not required to quote word for word. You know what's going on. Okay. They present dates, ritual milestones that track very closely to Daniel's desecration, the vindication, that whole narrative. Okay. How long exactly? We already talked about this. Kislev 15, which is the desecration, 162, to the rededication, which is Kislev 25, 164, which is approximately 1100 to 1150 days, not years, not 2300 years, none of that. It's laughable, in my opinion. That's just not textually driven. So we talked about how that all pans out. How did the ancient readers read it? Very clearly. I mean, you look at Josephus, you look at Qumran texts that apply Daniel's time markers typologically to it. Now, yeah, you're right. This doesn't necessarily dispute the fact that Edwin claimed, well, there's not an explicit link. You don't need an explicit link. You don't. Okay. You don't need someone to spell it out. You should know these things if you were historically a part of this time frame. You knew what was going on and connected the dots like that. That's it. Okay. Again, I'll bring it back to something that hits home. You don't need explicit statements about the Trinity and that exact word in order to demand that the Trinity is a valid Christian doctrine. You don't need it. Okay. So enough said on that. All right. So he did claim, and I'll kind of round the plane on this one. He did claim linguistic and hermeneutic. So he claimed that there was this inference. He made this inference. I'm inferring something. Okay. I'm not sure what he thinks I'm inferring exactly. Apocalyptic literature speaks in symbolic numbers and typological structures. That's what happens. Okay. If you think that that's inference, okay, then you are misunderstanding the genre in which we are reading. Symbolic numerology. That's the medium. Like, I don't really know why he thinks I'm inferring something. Okay. If you look at the typological reading, which was pretty standard in Second Temple Judaism, okay, numbers actually function theologically. So that's a thing. So this 3-year arc, this signal, this divine governance signal that connects divine governance with sanctuary vindication and restoration beyond like this literal counting thing. It doesn't have to be literal. It doesn't have to be explicit. It doesn't have none of the things that, Edwin, none of the things that you demand of the text are needed. So while I'm responding to it, I don't need to give you a response to them. They're not needed. There's something that you subvert on the text. It's not needed. And if you think it is needed, then I will demand the same thing back of you, which you can't provide. Okay. All right. As an interesting point of discussion, just put this on your bucket list to look at. Okay. Can I find, where's antiquities? Let me look at, I didn't have it hyperlinked in here. Josephus. Let me look at the one I was trying to find. Oh yeah, right here, the works of Josephus. Okay. If you look at the works of Josephus, you're going to get what's called a Loeb number when you look at Josephus. Loeb number is these numbers here, where it dictates the way it's notated is this is the works of Josephus. It's book 10. So you'll see it down here, book 10. You'll see chapter 11. So you get 10.11.7. And then you also get a 10.276. So 10 is the book, and then 276 is the actual kind of the numbering of it. So if you go 276 through 281, if you want to read it, I'm not going to read it. Okay. So it basically will, I mean, it tells you the detail. Okay. And indeed it so came to pass that our nation suffered these things under Antiochus Epiphanes, according to Daniel's vision. Deal with about choked on my water. Deal with this historical reality. Okay. Now, maybe Edwin would argue that Josephus isn't a good historian. I don't know what his argument is, because when I was an Adventist, they could not stop talking about Josephus. Okay. Josephus was kind of the Jewish historian. Well, the Jewish historian claims that this is exactly what was talking about. Okay. So it clearly demonstrates, okay, from a historical standpoint, that an early Jewish historian reading of Daniel's visions, it connects the Antiochus Epiphanes persecution and the temple, the profaning of the temple, the restoration of it. Okay. Now you can also find some of this. This is really interesting. Okay. I'm going to go back to the AI tool here, and I'm going to ask, where can I find y'all may not have heard of this. This is a really fun rabbit hole trail to go on. Okay. Where can I find the Pesher of Habakkuk? Okay. One of the things I really love about the study assistant in Logos is that you can ask it anything. Okay. It'll tell you if it can and can't do it. You can ask it, tell me in the Bible where, tell me, this, that, whatever. They're developing it more and more and more. But I want you to understand something. I'm not going to go through the details on it, but the Pesher of Habakkuk, and you can even, if you don't know what a Pesher is, okay, what is a Pesher? Okay. You can even ask it things like this, and it's not going to just like spit out an AI response. Okay. And this is the reason why it's important to, again, up your game with regards to this kind of stuff. Okay. This is going to give you cited sources to read why this is being responded the way it is. Okay. A Pesher is a form of biblical interpretation peculiar to Qumran. Okay. Yes, It's the Pesher of Habakkuk from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Yes. Okay. That is correct. What's unique about this? Now, it is an interpretation. I get that. Okay. So you just think of it that way. It's a Pesher of Habakkuk is an interpretation of Habakkuk that you may or may not agree with, but it's helpful because it's showing you kind of the way it was understood. So this was actually discovered in 1947 in K1 at Qumran. So this is actually the numbering system here is 1 is the first cave, Q is Qumran, P stands for Pesher, and HAB is Habakkuk. Okay, so it's the scroll, it's the Habakkuk scroll, and it's the Pesher of that. It's best preserved. It's the best preserved Pesher among all Dead Sea Scrolls, preserving 13 columns of commentary on this section. Okay. Now, you can come down and look at some of this, and I think this is where, let me see if this is, hopefully my Logos doesn't freak out and crash on me. It was crashing earlier. Oh, it just crashed. I did an update right before, and it did not like the update. I shouldn't have done an update, to be very honest. But let me give you kind of the lines here, okay? And then if we can get this back up, great. If not, it is what it is. But it basically says God told Habakkuk to write what is going to happen to the last generation, and the interpretation concerns what's called the teacher of righteousness, the wicked priest. Now, the purpose of this is while Pesherim comment, they comment on various prophets, and this is not a commentary on Daniel, okay? But they model the community's practice of decoding prophetic symbols and time frames into contemporary history, and that's from it's a very hermeneutic use that we can understand how they would have kind of looked at Daniel's time markers in the Antiochene events. Okay, that's the reason why I bring it up. So if you want to check that out and you want to pay attention to it, yeah, go check it out. Join the Discord channel if you want to see some of that stuff, and I can share some details with you as well. Okay. Okay. I think we're going to be done with, I think we'll just be done with that section for now. How's that? How about we jump into the real part of episode 11? I had to get through that. I had to do some sort of a rebuttal to the situation. So let's see if we can get this back up and running. Give me just a second, and I'm going to get some of this back working. Let me get this in a floating window. Let me see do my outlays still work? Okay, so give me a second here. And I'm using a new system just so that you all know. And when it reboots like that, I've got to kind of reconnect a few things. So bear with me for just a hot minute. Let me get this one reconnected as well. Bear with me. There it is. Very good. Okay, we are rolling. Yeah, I don't know what it is. I actually think I see some of you talking about the updates. I actually think what it is on my end is I'm a part of the beta program, which is the unstable kind of cutting edge part of Logos, because I like to see what's coming down the pipeline. And so when I updated to the like 48.1 beta, And I guarantee you they're going to come out with a new update patch, because I think there's something going on inside of it that's actually the problem. All right, so let's get into the heart of this. This is the 70 weeks part of the conversation. By the way, if you want to know my actual response to Roy Gane, okay, go to the Patreon. If you scan the QR code, I don't know which side, I don't know if it's flipped or not. In the upper right-hand corner, scan the code. You're welcome to join the Discord channel. Adventist, non-Adventist, former Adventist, whatever you are, you're welcome to join us. We got a community of about 130 people. We talk about a lot of different stuff. If you are an Adventist and you want to just debate Adventist things, when you join, we will kind of inquire on that, and we'll place you in a part of that group that is designed for just that. The irony is that we have not had too many Adventists that even want to come in and have honest conversation with former Adventists. So there's that, but it's there, it's set up for it. So please do join the conversation. But head over to Patreon if you so desire. I have it at the top here where it says become a Patreon, a patron at Patreon. I would be greatly honored if you would support the ministry there, or becoming a member of the channel, or just like, subscribe, hit the notification button on the YouTube channel as well, and you'll get lots of good kind of behind the scenes stuff. On the Patreon account, one of the articles that I wrote was responding to the interview that ADL did with Roy Gane and kind of my response to it. So please do go check it out. All right, let's advance to the 11th claim. Now, this is specifically dealing with, we're shifting, okay? We're not moving the goalpost, but we're shifting. I actually didn't cover that in Edwin's claim. He claimed that I moved the goalpost. You want to talk about moving the goalpost, Edwin, by the way. I think y'all moved the goalpost with regards to 1843, 1844, and then from earth to heaven. So I think you moved the goalpost. We are dealing with, in these rebuttals, we're dealing with specific claims that came from a video that was 11 bombshell refutes of biblical refuting that ADL believes that Antiochus cannot be and is not connected to the little horn. I don't even think that they would connect it in any way, shape, or form. Maybe they connect it in some way and not in other ways. But if I understand their argument correctly, they don't want to be connected to it being the little horn in any way, shape, or form. Now, the claim, I didn't actually put the video together just for the sake. I knew that this was going to be a longer conversation. So I am going to read the claim for this particular video, or this section on the 70 weeks. And so what I always try to do is I try to steelman the argument, and then I deal with the statements, kind of working it through the process. Okay. The claim that Jason makes, and I believe that Edwin and the rest of ADL supports. Okay. Sorry. Yes, I got the memo. But unfortunately, Adventism latches on to that horrible interpretation. It's interesting to me. Sorry, you're going to get me sidetracked. It's interesting to me that the Adventists almost have immortalized William Miller, where William Miller actually recanted and went back and claimed that he was entirely wrong in making that claim. What Adventists did, what the first Advent and then what moved into the Adventist movement, what they did was, I think, even more egregious. Just because, I mean, William Miller explicitly said he was wrong. And then they just, through Ellen White, they take it and become this, like it's something else. And there's all kinds of horrible things that happen with it. I mean, even to the point that Ellen White claimed that the wrong date, the October 22, 1844 date, even though it was wrong, that God specifically put his hand over the little flock to get it wrong. And even a step further from that, and again, I'm paraphrasing, okay? A step further from that, Ellen White even used that as almost like a litmus test, okay? If anyone recanted and said that they were wrong and left the little flock movement, those were the ones that actually in her vision where they fell off the path, that's actually what she's referring to, okay? They fell off the path and they could no longer be, because she claimed that it was the great litmus test. No, like, I mean, that's even more egregious. So yes, John, that's exactly the claim that, now, obviously it's not said that way. God tricked them, but the actual quote from Ellen White is something along the effect that God put his hand over. He like prevented them from knowing, so it's this insinuation of like he intentionally deceived them, which we know is not the case. And again, that's a whole nother conversation, but with regards to the second coming, with regards to Jesus coming again, I mean, scripture's pretty clear. No one's going to know. It's not like that would be God disagreeing with himself. Like he explicitly said, no one is going to know. So for him to like deceive a group of people to thinking that they're going to know, and then that was the test. Yeah. Talk about the worst moving of goalposts ever, is the beginning point of Adventism. All right. So here's the claim. Let me get back on point. Okay. Because we got 53 minutes. I promised I would be done 52 minutes. And I'll have to shut it down. So here's the claim that the ADL, here's the steel man, okay? The timeline of the 70 weeks, the 490 years in Daniel 9, that timeline proves that Daniel's focus was shifted beyond the Antiochene events. This is their argument, okay? So the prophecy culminates not in the Maccabean period, which is what we've just been talking about. Like Edwin was pretty clear, okay? Oh, no, it doesn't have anything to do with this, okay? You're wrong, okay? They have to make that argument. And the follow-up to that is that the prophecy culminates not in the Maccabean period, but in the coming of the Messiah and the destruction of Jerusalem by the Romans. And because of that, okay, that's their argument point one, their logic point. Because of that, therefore, the Antiochene framework for chapters 8, which we're just in, and chapter 11 can't be. They can't hold. And since chapter 9 moves the historical horizon forward by centuries and centers on Christ, that's their argument, okay? Not on Antiochus. And so their argument is, see, this is way past the timeline, the 70 weeks. It doesn't include it. It can't include it. This is another way of them determining that it can't be the Antiochene framework. Now, with regards to chapter 9, I'm going to make some statements that some of you may not even agree with me. Okay, so some here that are evangelical Protestants, Roman Catholic, that are non-Adventists, you might disagree with me on chapter 9. That's okay. I don't need you to agree with me on it. Actually, we don't need, I'm going to talk about this when we get to it. We don't need to actually read it through a traditionally viewed way. Okay, there's no reason that, again, that's the whole argument that I made before about there's nothing in the text that says you're required to view it through this lens. Okay, we wrestle with the text. Okay. So let's kind of examine whether this conclusion that they make is a necessity. Is this a good argument? So from the standpoint of textual exegesis, grounded in the text, when I say that, I'm talking about grounded in the context of what created the text. Okay. What we're going to see is that the 70 weeks have very distinct literary aims from Daniel 8. Yet, they still inhibit the same historical and theological world. And that world is that the entire, or the exile to restoration pattern that culminates in the Antiochus crisis is the climactic cutting off of the anointed one. Okay. The desecration of the temple. Now, there will be disagreements on the cutting off and the anointed one aspect. I'm okay with that. Okay. I don't need you to agree with me on this. I also need to be very clear. You don't need to agree with me on this to be Christian. Okay. I am a Christ follower. I have accepted Jesus as my Savior. I believe in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ as the gift that has paid for every bit of sin that is in me. Okay. I live in Christ. I accept his gift of salvation. That's the gospel. So when we're wrestling with some of this, I'm going to do it respectfully. We don't all have to agree on this in any way, shape, or form. Okay. Let's look at the text in its context. Let's go to Daniel 9, and we're going to look at the text in its context. Okay. We see right off, okay, when we're looking at this, in the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus. Now, I'm not going to get into the historical textual stuff, okay? Maybe when we get to me doing the dating and authorship of Daniel, which I will get to, we'll talk about some of these textual things. But I want you to notice that the first year of Darius, son of Ahasuerus, by birth a Mede, okay? This is continuing the Babylonian Persian setting. Okay. When we get to verse 2, I, Daniel, perceived in the books the number of years that according, now notice, this is another one of those, it's zeroing in, okay? Perceived in the books the number of years that, and then it tells you, according to the word of the Lord, to the prophet Jeremiah, must be fulfilled for the devastation of Jerusalem, namely 70 years. Now, we're going to get to the whole years thing and the ins and outs, but notice that Daniel prays for the end of, he calls upon Jeremiah's kind of connection, okay, according to the word of the Lord to the prophet Jeremiah. Now, the response, then I turned in the Lord God to seek an answer by prayer and supplication with fasting and sackcloth and ashes. I prayed to the Lord my God and made confession saying, ah, Lord, and he makes this confession, okay, righteous is on your side, okay. Gabriel arrives with a message that extends. I want you to notice, let's see, where is, okay. While I was speaking and was praying and confessing my sin, presented with supplication when I was speaking in prayer, guess what? Okay. Gabriel shows up, whom I had seen before in a vision. Came to me in swift flight at the time of, oh, look at that. Areb. There it is again. At the time of the evening sacrifice. It's pretty clear that that's the sacrifice. Hopefully you're seeing all this, okay? Now, what does he say? As he speaks, okay, he came and said to me, Daniel, I have now come out to give you wisdom and understanding. At the beginning of your supplication, a word went out, and I came to declare it. And for you, you are greatly beloved. So consider the word and understand the vision. Now, notice that his vision, the response, the quotation here, or the words that are kind of being given by Gabriel, he arrives with a message that is extending Jeremiah's 70 into 70 weeks. Okay. So just notice what's going on in the text. Okay. So we have in verse 24, we have 70 weeks, 77s. Okay. Is the way you would understand that. This sabu, sabu is 77s. So 70 weeks. Okay. 77s are decreed for your people. Now, the first half of verse 25a, what does it say? Know therefore and understand, from the time that the word went out to restore, we'll get to that whole like restoration thing, until the time of an anointed priest, there shall be 7 weeks. Okay. The first 7 sevens is the rebuilding of Jerusalem. And the 62 weeks, it shall be built again with streets and moat. So when we get to the next 62 sevens, continuing trouble, at the end, an anointed one is going to be cut off. Okay. But in a troubled time, and notice what it says, after this time period. So you get the first 7, you get the next 62 sevens. And then after the 62 sevens, an anointed one shall be cut off. So that's the final week. Notice what else? The troops of the prince. Now, this is a hard one for people. Again, I'm just going to give you an insert of kind of where I'm coming from, okay? The anointed one, if you connect that to the Messiah, the troops of the prince who is to come shall destroy. I don't know how that all connects to that whole thing. Okay. I'm going to work through how I think it works. Okay. Its end shall come with a flood, and to the end there shall be war. Desolation shall be decreed. Now pay attention. He, okay, whoever you decide the he is in this, the referent for he, we'll get to that, made a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And for half of the week he shall make sacrifice and offering cease, and in their place shall be desolating sacrilege until the decreed end is poured out upon the desolator. So the last week replicates, if you pay attention, this is prose. It replicates in prose the narrative pattern of chapter 8. Abolition of sacrifice, abomination that makes desolate, limited period, end of the desolator. So you may or may not agree with me on this, but it is repeated language that connects to the Antiochene horizon. Now, I keep saying this. Some of are going to diverge on kind of how we cut this apart and how we make sense of this. Okay, and that's okay. I will kind of share with you what I think is the most accurate, but some of these things, as we get into this, it's complicated. Okay. It is very complicated. Okay. Now, the purpose of the 70-week revelation, Gabriel answers, his specific answer extends Jeremiah's 70 years. Doesn't just say this is Jeremiah's, okay? But instead, it extends Jeremiah's 70 years into a symbolic series of sevens. So we have basically something that becomes theological rather than necessitating direct mathematical precision. So we have Israel's transgression gets multiplied. Divine wrath duration increases proportionately, but it remains bound and ends ultimately in purification. These are all the same themes that we get in chapter 8. So The weeks in chapter 9 it recasts Jeremiah's temporal hope into what I would call an apocalyptic timetable. Okay, it's reflecting how restoration proved incomplete and sin kind of reemerged, and it reemerges and it culminates in another desecration, namely Antiochus. Now, I think that this is still connected to the Antiochene framework. You can dialogue with me and maybe disagree with me a little bit on this. Okay. There are very clear, in my opinion, motifs between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9. Now, in the Adventist position, specific chapters have to be seen a certain way and either do get linked or don't get linked. There's no textual reason for that many times. Okay. If you're just following the text for what it says, there's the same concern. If you look at Daniel 8 and Daniel 9, you have sanctuaries defiled in both of them. There is an agent. There is someone. Okay. It's labeled the little horn in chapter 8. In chapter 9, it's the prince who is to come, destroying city and sanctuary. There's a parallel there. Okay. There's a historical oppressor that's in view there. And then you have the outcome. Sanctuary is vindicated. In chapter 8. In chapter 9, it gets phrased as upon the wings of abomination, desolator until decreed end. So there's this limited time, and then there's divine judgment. So to me, there's a parallel between Daniel 8 and Daniel 9. Okay. Now let's kind of talk a little bit about verse 25. Let's talk about 25. Let's talk about this section right here. Okay. From the time that the word went out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Now, I don't think this was adequately dealt with in the dialogue with Roy Gane. Okay. But the question, like if I were reading this and trying to understand what the text is saying, is this clearly is a referent point to something that the author is trying to connect it to, whatever that is. Okay. So the question becomes, well, when was the actual decree? When did the word go out to restore and rebuild Jerusalem? Now, this verse, it doesn't refer to an edict by Cyrus or Artaxerxes centuries earlier, but it refers to the prophetic word that's already in Jeremiah. Daniel 9:2. Okay. Let's go back. Okay. He received. Okay. According to the word of the Lord, the prophet. Okay. Now, there are several, if you take it as the traditional, let's just do this for a second. Just again, this is kicks and giggles. Okay. Let's go to the study guide for just a second. Okay. How many decrees to rebuild Jerusalem were there with regards to Daniel 9:25? Now, I've not done this before. I don't even know what's going to pop up. Okay. I don't even have this in my notes. Okay. So you're watching this live. I don't know what's going to pop up, but this is the type of stuff that I would do. Okay. The claim from Adventism is that this is exactly to 457. Well, there's a problem. Okay. Because the first decree was Cyrus in 538. Yes, you're absolutely right. Possibly 4. It's actually pretty ambiguous. Okay. And this is again one of the arguments that I make. Like if you're gonna make a definitive decision and you're gonna make a doctrine that's based on all this date setting, man, you doggone it, you better be right. Because if you're not, like you're gonna be miles away. You're gonna be miles off. So the first one was this one here. It's recorded in Second Chronicles. Maybe I should make this a little bit bigger for the audience to see. That's a little better. The second one was Darius the First, 520. Artaxerxes issued a third in 458. The fourth decree, also from this, came in 445 and authorized Nehemiah to build Jerusalem as recorded. I'm sorry. I caught that when I looked over. You get a decree and you get a decree. So I just want you to notice the fourth decree by 457 is this is what is coming up in this reference. Okay. This is the Logos research system. This is verse by verse through. This is by Grant Richardson. Whether or not you agree with him or not, you know where he's coming from. Okay. This individual is claiming that the fourth decree, which is 447 or 445, is the decree referenced in Daniel 9:25 in the beginning of 490 years. Now, 445 doesn't even connect to 457. Okay. I want you to feel the problem here. Problem is we don't actually know. And quite frankly, the reason why some of these dates are a little bit different than probably what an Adventist might be used to seeing. Notice 457 isn't even in here. Okay. You have Artaxerxes issued the third degree in 458. Okay. Now this is all coming from one resource. So maybe it's an Adventist resource that says that. Okay. So you really have, again, I want you to understand, if you're watching, that the Adventist position rests wholly on 2300 evening mornings being days, meaning years. Okay. If you grant that position, let's just forget about who the little horn is for a second. If you grant that position, and let's say it is prophetic years, now you have to come up with, well, which decree is it? And even in the third decree, which Adventists think is 457, there are some scholars that claim it's 458. Okay. And you don't even know if that's the one. There's no way of determining which one it is. And the whole, I mean, if you pay attention to the context of the verse, you'll notice that it specifically says right down here, okay, and for 62 weeks it shall be built again with streets and moat. Well, when is that? I don't even think we have a historical referent for that. We might, okay. This is Ezra 4:24. We have Nehemiah chapter 2. We have Isaiah 9:6. So I'm hoping that you're feeling the challenge to convey this as, a certainty. I know exactly that this is this particular date and it goes 2,300 years and it goes to October 20. Even why October 22? There's just a plethora of issues. Now, I want to talk for just a second. I want to talk about verse 26. An anointed one shall be cut off. Okay. So here we have this is Messiah. Okay. This is the way we would get Messiah. I do want you to notice that in the text, we have two Messiahs. Okay. So there's a couple things to pay attention. These are all they're not the same words. This is anoint versus this is anointed. This is an anointed nagid, anointed prince, okay? And this is an anointed one, which is just Messiah, okay? Fundamentally, the word, okay, Mashiach in Hebrew, it denotes it's really any consecrated figure that's either a priest or a ruler. And this is not unique to just the Christ, okay? Which, by the way, the Christ, okay, when we think of Christ, Christ is actually the Greek version. Christos is the Greek version of Mashiach, okay? So yes, Jesus is given the title of the anointed one, the Messiah, but that doesn't mean that in Hebrew, all of the Mashiachs are connected to the Jesus figure, okay? Now, how would you kind of quickly pay attention to this? Well, you can very easily go and you can do a word search here and just let's just go, you can see in the NRSVU UE, it gets translated two different ways, but just look at the referent points. Okay, we've got an anointed priest. Most of it's tied to an anointed priest. Most of it. Okay. In fact, in the Old Testament, that is the lion's share of what this term means. Now, that doesn't mean just because something is the lion's share doesn't mean that just because it's the majority, it is therefore, always the case. Okay. But David's considered an anointed one. The Lord's anointed. You get this in Daniel 9:25, 26. Habakkuk, to save your anointed. This is, you came forth to save your people, to save your anointed. This is actually referring to the people of Israel. You get it sometimes in Psalms. Do not touch my anointed one. Do my prophet no harm. So you can see here. I want you to understand that the concept does not need. Okay, there's nothing that's saying it requires in the text for this to be Jesus. Okay, that's my initial point. Okay, so if we're trying to, from a historical grammatical standpoint, we're trying to let the actual context of what's going on kind of drive the conversation, then I'm going to argue that the referent point for all of this, because of all the parallels, all the other things that are going on, okay, is going to connect to the high priest Onias III. He was an anointed one. He was considered an anointed one. Okay. He was deposed. He was murdered. Well, when was he murdered? He was murdered in 171. Notice how that fits the Antiochene perspective. Okay. How do we know this to be the case? Well, 2 Maccabees 4, 33 and 34 actually talk about his murder. Okay. This is the referent point for what the ancient Jewish interpreters, Josephus, early rabbinic sources, they pretty much exclusively associate Onias's death as the connected with the Antiochus persecution. Now there's debate on this. Okay. So, I'm not like locked in as like it has to be this. Okay. But understand that when you're looking at all the cues in the texts, this seems to be a better referent point, in my opinion, than it connecting to Jesus. Don't crucify me for saying that. Okay. All right. Now, when you go to Daniel 9:26, the people of the prince that shall come shall destroy the city and the sanctuary. This is also a very, I think, contextually grounded understanding, and the people of a coming prince, that actually connects to Antiochus's army. Okay, so Antiochus was considered a prince. Okay, now he was under the officers that he was under was Apollonius, Lysias, who basically ravaged. These are the people that ravaged Jerusalem in 167 BC. And again, this matches historically with First Maccabees 1:29 to 31. It basically says that they became, stuck. They struck the city and they burned it with fire. So as we move through these, verse 25, verse 26, okay, verse 27, these are all connecting still. If you keep it, in my opinion, if you keep it connected in context, this is all still going to be connected to the Antiochian scheme. Okay. He shall confirm a covenant with many for a week. Let's talk about this. Cause sacrifice and offering to cease. Set up abomination. Well, guess what? The Antiochus policy, his policy when he rolled into town, his policy of Hellenizing, Hellenization involved a new covenant. Now, you have to understand that covenant just doesn't just mean like new and old covenant. It's not just tied to covenantal language with regards to Yahweh. Covenants were a thing that were done between multiple groups. Okay. So this enforcing of this new covenant with apostate Jews, okay, which is the term for Baruth. Okay. That it gets described in First Maccabees 1:11 to 15. Well, can I yeah, we can go to that. Let's go to that real quick so you can see that. Okay. First Maccabees 1:11. Notice that in those days, certain renegades came from Israel and misled many, saying, "Let us go and make a covenant with the nations around us, for since we separated from them, many disasters have become." These are apostate Jews, okay? This proposal pleased them, and some of the people eagerly went to the king, who authorized them to observe the ordinances of the nations. So they built a gymnasium in Jerusalem according to the customs of the nation, and made foreskins for themselves and abandoned the holy covenant. They joined with the nations and sold themselves to do evil. They basically made a covenant with the Gentiles, with the apostate. I mean, it's like, I don't know how you can miss this. Like, unless you intentionally don't want to see this, or if you've never been exposed to it. Okay. And you're exactly right. I mean, Antiochus, it deals with the issue. This is a covenant with Jews that had apostatized. They were evil. They turned away from the holy covenant. They abandoned it, and they made a covenant with this anointed, deal. And this is all tied to the anointed one, right? Onias III, all of that stuff. Okay. The abomination of desolation. It repeats, and this is my argument, it repeats the Daniel 8:13 and 11:31 lexically and thematically. So every major clause displays, in my opinion, this is just where I'm at right now. Daniel 9 parallels Daniel 8 schematically. Like, there's thematics that's connecting the two. Okay. Now I understand that this is a little bit, maybe theologically problematic for some, because they don't like the idea that what they've been told with the cutting off is tied to 70 weeks, tied to like Jesus coming and that whole thing. But you have to understand that interpretation is actually a pretty recent Christian phenomenon. It's pretty recent. Okay. So, yeah. So let's kind of summarize here. So 7 weeks, okay? Remember, let's go back to um let's go back to the beginning here where we talk about the numbers, okay? We get the sevens and the sevens. Let's go down to the interpretation part right here, okay? 70 weeks to decreed. And then the 62 weeks, like all this time, okay? So you get the 7 weeks, which is 49 years. Remember, it's 7 sevens, okay? 7 sevens, 49 years. You get the prophetic word of Jeremiah. You get the historical range for this is like roughly 538 to 490 thereabouts. Okay. Again, rough. I don't like putting dates on this. This is all looking back and going, oh, this is kind of what happened. Like I see that. Okay. Prophecy is meant to be understood once it happens. Okay. It's not meant to predict all the time. In fact, most of the time it doesn't predict. It's only really understood once the thing occurs. Okay. 62 weeks, which is 439 from restored city to the murder of Onias III. That would be roughly all the way till like 171, which is when Onias III is murdered. The final week, which is the 7 years, that's the kind of the culmination of the desolation and the deliverance. Antiochus IV reigns. That's his final reign of persecution, and then it gets restored. Okay, 140. Let's say 164. I think it is BC. So I think that it's most textually grounded to see it this particular way. Now I do want to respond. Okay, I've got like 18 minutes. Okay, I do want to respond real quick because the general issue with this understanding is, I mean, I've heard people say that when I explain this, I've had people claim that how can you even, like, you don't even believe in the scriptures because you're somehow taking away the Jesus the Messiah and this messianic prophecy. Clearly, people that have made those statements or make those kind of assertions, they haven't spent much time in the actual text, and they haven't spent much time in like textual criticism dealing with the actual issues in the text. So the traditional view for this prophecy, the 70 weeks, being that the anointed one is Jesus Christ, slain under Rome. Okay. My kind of response to that is that in Hebrew, Meshiach Nagid, it simply means an anointed priest ruler, or an anointed ruler, or an anointed priest. There's nothing in the text that demands that it has to be Jesus Christ. Okay. There's nothing there. Onias and his death is contemporaneous it matches contemporaneously, both wording and chronologically. And so Antiochus's oppression follows immediately after that in verse 27. So to me, it fits the way the language of the 70-week prophecy is going about. Now, most will see covenant confirmed. Like if you remember, like in this 70 week, it says, and he will confirm a covenant. Most will kind of understand that, at least in the messianic view of this, is that that's the gospel covenant. Well, the covenant with many, which is in verse 9, let's see, verse 27. Okay. Covenant, he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. Okay. I want you to think about if this is the gospel covenant, the gospel covenant does not, it's not just for a week. And linguistically, it parallels the apostate alliances. Okay. In First Maccabees 1. It's not this salvific covenant, connection. Now, a lot of times what does come up, Adrian, I'll kind of get to your comment in just a second. You get this language of being cut off. Okay, shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the troops of the prince. So how my again, just from a linguistic standpoint, the anointed one shall be cut off and shall have nothing, and the troops of the prince. Like, how does this connect with this time? Like, this doesn't connect. It, like, the Jesus being in this prophecy doesn't. It just doesn't connect. It shall end with a flood, and to the end there shall be war, desolations are decreed. What does that have to do with Jesus' death? Like, it doesn't have anything to do with that time period. Okay. Generally, what they'll say is the cutoff is the city destruction equals like Jerusalem in 70. How is after 62 weeks? So this is not the death. Like, you understand how it gets kind of convoluted with trying to parse this together, okay? So the author, I think, the author of this section here, the horizon is the first temple being rebuilt and desecrated again. I mean, that's the parameter of the text. Daniel 11 already continues the Antiochene narrative without jumping to Rome. So there's no real precedence in Daniel 9 to somehow jump past the Antiochene. Like, Daniel 11 is already connecting the Antiochene narrative. So there's no real reason to connect it to, like, this section is jumping way past into Rome. It just doesn't linguistically match. It's a major jump for me. Okay. The 70 weeks, the entire 70 weeks, the 490 solar years from Persian, this is the way the messianic kind of prophecy fulfills. It's the Persian decree all the way to Christ. The challenge to that is the math only fits by selective endpoints and creative adjustments. Okay, so the symbolic pattern fits, to me, it fits Jewish numerology. Okay, if you look at like Leviticus 26:18, for example. So to me, that's kind of the rationale. The theological rationale for chapter 9 is, chapter 9, 5 to 11 deals with kind of like the cause of the exile and the continuing wrath. And then you have the ongoing desolation. Even after the return, sin persists. And therefore, Jeremiah's 70 week kind of prophecy expands to 70 times 7, which you get a much longer time period. And then it finally, the penalty and the vindication of this kind of culminates with the Antiochus persecution, which represents the climax of the covenant chastisement, basically. After which forgiveness and true restoration are granted. So that's the way I would kind of perceive. You get this in ancient Jewish interpretation. Now, I do want to go to. Let me just see if there's anything else I want to kind of make a reference to, because we're getting close to the out of time here. Now, I know that, yes, the New Testament does quote from Daniel 9. And yes, why would Jesus deny Jews see Daniel 9:26 being 70 AD? And those are valid questions, okay? And this is generally the most, how do I want to say this? The most difficult thing for people to kind of wrestle with. Okay. If you stay in Daniel and if you just address Daniel prior to Jesus coming on the scene, okay, pre-Christ, and we see this in Jewish interpretations, okay, it's all over the place that early Jewish rabbinic interpretations prior to the coming of Christ saw it in the way that we're looking at it, okay. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that just because they saw it that way, it's required to be right, okay? But having said that, when we get to, what is that? Matthew, someone put the text up for where Jesus quotes that. You know how I find this stuff up? If I don't know, let me just show you. This is just teaching you all how I do stuff, okay? Let's say that I know that Jesus does quote Daniel, okay? In the Bible, where does Jesus quote from Daniel 9? And I know most of you are already going to know this, okay? I don't have great memory to keep everything stacked up here, okay? Adrian's going to get to it before I do. But I want you to know how to kind of figure this out. Okay. So this is also very helpful, the way, the AI works, okay, to keep you kind of grounded in the text. So Jesus does refer to Daniel's prophecy broadly, most notably in Matthew 24:15 and Mark 13:14. So let's go there real quick. Okay. And one of the things I always like to do is if we're going to be kind of talking about, well, Jesus said this, okay. Well, let's look at the kind of overarching context. Okay. As Jesus came out of the temple and was going away, his disciples came to a point outside the buildings of the temple. And he asked, you see all this? Do you not? Truly, I tell you, not one stone will be left. I think most understand this to be the desecration of Jerusalem in, again, 70 AD. Okay. When he was sitting in the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately and said, tell us, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Now, this is interesting. Like, when will this happen? And what will be the sign of your coming and the end of the age? Jesus answered them, beware that no one leads you astray. Hey, here you go. Take a history lesson from Adventists, or Millerites, from Jesus. For many will come in my name, saying, I am the Messiah, and they will lead many astray, and you will hear wars, rumors of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. So I want you to understand something about the context of this verse, okay? The disciples are going to hear about wars and rumors of war. This is talking about their time period. Okay, this is not us time period. Jesus is having a conversation with them, and he's telling them, you're going to hear of wars, rumors of wars. Don't be alarmed. That isn't the end. Okay. For nation will rise against nation, kingdom against kingdom. There's going to be famines, earthquakes. These are just birth pains. Most people, when they read this passage, they think that this is talking about us. This is not like, Trump's going to war with Venezuela. See, this is prophesied. Jesus talked about it. That's not what the text is talking about. This is talking to the disciples. Okay. And then he goes on and he says, then they will hand you over to be tortured. This is all during their time period, and will put you to death, and you will be hated by all nations because of my name. This is all related to the disciples. Then many will fall away and they will betray one another. Many false prophets will arise. Remember how the apostles wrote about like false teachers and prophets? Okay. This is what Jesus was talking about. And because the increase of lawlessness, the love of many will grow old, but the one who endures to the end will be saved. And this is good news. Okay. And this good news of the kingdom will be proclaimed to the world as a testimony to all. What good news? It's the good news of Jesus, right? Okay. And then the end will come. Then he goes on and says, so when you see the desolating sacrilege spoken of the prophet Daniel. Now, this is the part that's hard for, I think, people. Okay. So you can parse this out two ways, I think. Okay. You can parse it out two ways. You can parse this out as Jesus was referring to the exact thing that Daniel was talking about. So whatever Daniel was talking about, that's an exact statement of what Jesus is referring to. If you do that, okay, then you come to the problem that most bring up. Well, then Daniel 9 can't be referring to, it has to be referring to Jesus. Okay. Now, that's an interpretive move. Okay. That's an interpretive move. I think it's key. We're going to cross parallel some of this. I think it's key that you hear this. Okay. Because my view currently on this, where I stand on this, is that if you were a Jew, you would understand what Jesus was talking about. He wasn't talking about the exact events. He was using what happened. He was using that as a way of connecting what was going to happen. Okay. Jerusalem was going to be destroyed. It was going to be utterly destroyed. Okay. And it's going to be very similar to the sacrilege. And I know there's no language here that says similar to. I get that. Okay. We're going to look at a parallel, though, coming up. Okay. But you should understand this. Okay. Let the reader understand. That's inserted for reasons. Okay. Well, how do we understand? Okay. Now, I want to go to the parallel passage. There's a couple of other passages. You can go to Mark. Okay. But when you see the desolating sacrilege set up where it ought not to be, notice again, let the reader understand. Then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Now, I notice that, thank you. I was trying to find it there. Sorry, I was clicking around. If you go to, these are all parallels here, okay? And this is all connected to the, like, pray that it's not on the Sabbath day and that whole thing. But Luke 21:20. Notice what Luke 21:20 says. When you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. All of these connect. All of these. Okay, so yes, 100%. This, what Jesus is referring to, is absolutely keyed in to AD 70. What's going to happen? And the time is not here yet. Okay, know that it's not going to be here yet. Pray that it's not on the Sabbath day because you're Jewish. It's going to be hard for you to run and flee to the mountains. By the way, the mountains were those that were around them. Okay, I see the funny comment here. I love this. Yeah, a little hard to do that in Ohio. Okay. This has nothing to do with, like, Jesus' second coming. That's not what this is connected to. But notice, when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, this is the same connection point. Then know that its desolation has come near. This is the connection point where I don't think that we need to, I'm not even sharing my screen. Okay. Notice that it says, then you know that the desolation has come near. Well, what desolation? It's the desolation that you need to think about with regards to what happened to Antiochus. It's a referent point that speaks of it's going to be that kind of desecration. It doesn't need to be the identical event. I don't think that's what Jesus is saying here. I don't think that's the connection point. Okay. And notice it says, then those in Judea must flee to the mountains. Where are the mountains? Oh, it's the Judean mountains. And those inside the city must leave. And those outside in the country must not enter it. Now, it's going to go on and talk about, some of the details of it. Okay. So, yes, the referent point for that is Jerusalem, but I don't think it's the right connection point to claim that Jesus is making a reference to Daniel 9 being the identical event. I don't think that's what was going on. Okay. So now there's only two ways to parse it. Okay. Because you can parse it the one way and then you can parse it the other way with regards to, kind of the way we just talked about it. But that's the way I would see all of these things. Friends, we have been on for 3 hours. Do me a favor, okay? Because I'm going to close things down. Do me a favor. Would you like? Would you subscribe? Would you hit the notification bell? Scan the QR code up in whichever corner it is for you. Scan the QR code. Join the Discord community. We have a lot going on. We have a lot of new things planned. Thank you for being here. Thank you for your patience as we've dived into lots of crazy stuff tonight. Continue to wrestle with the text. Please wrestle with it. Hold some of these things loosely. Study it deeply. If you're looking for gaining access to Logos, I will be doing some additional training for Logos in the near future. Most of that's going to be for members only. Okay, I'm going to start it off as a members only training. So please do subscribe if you can to the channel, whether it's through Patreon or whether it's through YouTube, because all of the training is going to initially go out to members only first, and then it will eventually come to those outside. Looking forward to the next conversation. By the way, we will be on Friday. This is a promise. We will get back into the next episode of Revelation on Friday. Many of you have been patient for that. It's been well over a month since we've done a Revelation series episode. I think we're on episode 38 now, 37, 38. But the time off has given many of you a chance to get caught up. So awesome. Glad. All right. Well, be patient, be thorough in your study, and continue to wrestle with the text. God bless you all, and we'll see you on the next one. Okay.